Do you want to be sure you're not alone amidst suffering and injustice? Do you want to realize that God remains trustworthy, even when victory seems distant? Psalm 44, Part 1, verses 1 to 13, can bring encouragement and renew your faith. It invites us to honesty before God, to express our pain, frustration, and feelings of abandonment, even when we feel betrayed or crushed by our enemies. But before we begin this journey, I want to invite you to share this video with someone who is going through difficult times and needs hope and trust in God. Subscribe to the channel to walk with us through the Psalms and activate notifications so you don't miss any studies. Let's spread the Word of God and strengthen our faith, even when we feel powerless and helpless. If you feel that struggles seem greater than your strength, that injustice surrounds you, and that enemies seem to triumph, this psalm is for you. If you have questioned why God allows difficulties, or if you feel frustrated by seeing evil prosper while faith remains firm in your heart, this psalm is for you. Psalm 44, in this part 1, verses 1 to 13, brings a voice that understands your pain. It reveals that even in the face of defeat and apparent abandonment, God remains trustworthy and does not cease to hear the cry of His people. It is an invitation to honestly express our frustrations, to carry our feelings before God, and to renew hope in His faithfulness. Throughout this video, we will delve verse by verse into the psalmist's heartfelt cry, understanding how he transforms pain, frustration, and feelings of abandonment into a call to trust in God. Each reflection is designed to touch your soul, strengthen your faith, and remind you that seeking God even in the midst of pain is a profound act of trust. Allow this psalm to speak to you in an intimate and transformative way. Stay with us until the end, when we will offer a prayer inspired by Psalm 44, Part 1, verses 1 to 13, prepared to calm your heart, renew your hope, and rekindle in you a living faith in God's faithfulness.
Verse 1. O God, we have heard of you with our ears. Our fathers have told us of the works you performed in their days, in ancient times.
Feel the voice of the ancients echoing in your heart, reminding you that God's faithfulness transcends generations. Each story of victory, deliverance, and protection awakens in us a hope that never fades. It is as if their words call us to trust, even when everything around us is uncertain. God is witness to every step of His people, and His actions remain as a beacon in the darkness. May this remembrance cause us to bow our hearts in reverence and gratitude. As we listen to these ancient stories, we realize that faith did not begin with us. It was given to us by hands that persevered before us. Each testimony acts as a bridge between the past and the present, reminding us that the God who acted yesterday continues to act today. These accounts awaken in us a sense of spiritual belonging, as if we were part of a great story that God has been writing for centuries. The memory of divine deeds keeps alive the flame that pain tries to extinguish. And it is in this spiritual heritage that we find the strength to continue. He who acted in the past remains the same today. Today, this verse teaches us to value and learn from the faith experiences of our ancestors. Hearing stories of perseverance and trust in God strengthens our own faith. We can meditate on how He has already acted in our lives and in the lives of those who came before us, allowing these memories to give us courage in the face of current difficulties. Recognizing God's historical faithfulness encourages us to trust in Him today, even when the challenges seem great. To reflect, have I remembered God's works in the past? Have I trusted in His faithfulness for my life today? Am I passing on God's teachings?
Verse 2. With your own hand you drove out the nations and planted us. You destroyed peoples and made us inherit the land.
Feel the strength of God acting firmly, guiding His people with power and justice. He not only protects us, but positions us in places of blessing, showing that His will is sovereign. Each victory against oppression reminds us that nothing escapes His control. It is an invitation to recognize that we are participants in a greater story, where God's hand acts in favor of those who faithfully seek Him. May our trust in Him not depend on circumstances, but on the certainty of His constant action. There are times when we realize that we haven't advanced by the strength of our own arm, but because God, with His invisible care, has opened paths we could never have reached alone. He moves what seems impossible to change and plants our feet on peaceful ground where before there was only struggle. He is the one who removes what threatens and strengthens what needs to remain. When we look back, we see that His hand has sustained us in every detail, and when we look ahead, we understand that we will still depend on that same loving hand. Thus, we learn to walk with confidence, even without understanding everything. Applying this verse today challenges us to recognize the places and opportunities God grants us. Even in the face of injustice or hardship, we can trust that He positions us to fulfill His purpose. Observing how He guides us to overcome obstacles and prosper in areas of life inspires us to remain steadfast. Valuing the spiritual and moral heritage we have received is recognizing that our mission is to continue this work of faith and witness in our time. To reflect, have I recognized the blessings God has given me? Do I trust that He positions me to fulfill my purpose? Am I using my spiritual heritage to impact my life and the lives of others?
Verse 3. It was not by our sword that we conquered the land, nor by our own arm that we were saved, but by your right hand and your arm, and by the light of your face, for you favored us.
David teaches us that victory is not born from human strength, but from complete trust in God. He recognized that without the Lord's hand, any effort would be in vain. This verse reminds us that true power lies in depending on God, in the invisible favor that acts when our resources are exhausted. The psalmist's life reveals humility before the Creator and gratitude for divine care, remembering that every achievement is the fruit of His action and not of personal merit. There are times when God guides us so silently that it almost seems we are fighting alone, but we are not. His hand remains there, firm, stable, supporting what we do not see. He acts behind the scenes of the soul, strengthening us when weariness sets in and opening doors when everything seems closed. The victory that comes from God is different. It does not exalt the ego, it matures the heart. It is a victory that not only moves us forward, but transforms us from within. Trusting in Him is learning to rest in the unseen that works in our favor. Applying this teaching today means realizing that we shouldn't boast about our achievements, but rather acknowledge God's presence and help at every step. When challenges seem greater than our strength, remember that victory comes from divine favor and brings us courage and peace. We can trust that He guides our decisions and illuminates our paths, even when everything indicates that we are alone in the struggle. To reflect, have I attributed my achievements to God? Do I trust in His actions even when my strength is insufficient? How can I seek His favor more in my daily decisions?
Verse 4. You are my King, O God, ordain salvation for Jacob.
In this verse, David reveals his unwavering trust in God as sovereign King, the one who governs and saves. Even in the face of difficulties, injustices, and the apparent weakness of His people, he recognizes that every victory depends on God's action. It is a call to place our hopes in divine leadership, knowing that He knows the time and the way to lead us to salvation. Feeling God's presence as our King gives us security even when the situation seems impossible. It is an invitation to recognize that we are not alone and that there is a greater purpose in every struggle. There are times when the heart needs to remember who truly reigns over all things. When everything around seems out of order, God remains seated on His throne, serene, firm, and sovereign. It is in this recognition that the soul finds rest, because knowing that He governs changes how we face our struggles. We do not walk at the mercy of circumstances, but under the watchful care of the eternal King. When fear whispers uncertainties, the gentle voice of divine sovereignty calls us to trust. And it is in this sacred place that faith breathes again. Today, Applying this verse means trusting that God is sovereign over our lives and circumstances. When we face crises, injustices, or challenges that seem insurmountable, we can remember that He is in control. It is a call to seek His guidance in important decisions, to surrender our daily battles to Him, and to believe that salvation and deliverance will come according to His will. Recognizing God as King allows us to act with courage and faith, even in the midst of adversity. To reflect, do I fully trust in God as my King? Do I surrender my daily battles and decisions to Him? Am I patiently waiting for the salvation He promises?
Verse 5. Through you we will defeat our enemies. Through your name we will trample those who rise up against us.
David demonstrates a confidence that transcends fear. He does not rely on his own strength or human strategies, but on God's faithfulness. Even in the face of numerous and powerful adversaries, he recognizes that protection and victory belong to the Lord. Every courageous step is sustained by the certainty that God's name is stronger than any opposition. This confidence transforms the heart, bringing security amidst battles. Feeling safe in God's hands is an invitation to total surrender. There are times when the soul tries to fight alone, as if it needs to prove something to itself or to the world. But this verse reminds us that true strength is born when we relinquish control and lift our eyes to God. It is in the silence of prayer that we understand that we are not abandoned. He enters our battles invisibly, yet powerfully, changing scenarios that never seemed possible we would achieve with our own hands. And when we realize this, fear begins to lose its hold on our hearts. Confidence grows, not because we are strong, but because God is faithful. In these times, this verse inspires us to entrust our own battles to the Lord. Problems at work, family conflicts, or personal challenges may seem greater than our strength, but true victory depends on God. Surrendering our strategies, fears, and plans to Him allows us to experience His guidance and power. Every difficult situation becomes an opportunity to trust in divine sovereignty. The Lord is our guide and shield in all circumstances. To reflect, have I truly entrusted my struggles to God, or do I try to solve them alone? Am I willing to depend on His power even when I feel weak? Do I recognize that true victory comes from the Lord?
Verse 6. For I will not trust in my bow, nor will my sword save me.
David reveals here the essence of faith that depends entirely on God. He recognizes that his own weapons and abilities are insufficient against the forces of the enemy. It is an act of spiritual humility to admit that victory does not come from human strength, but from divine power. He teaches us that true confidence lies in recognizing our limitations and seeking the Lord's intervention. Every battle won is a result of God's faithfulness, not our strategy or strength. This verse invites us to surrender everything into the hands of the Creator. Even when the enemy intimidates us with his apparent strength, the psalmist reminds us that our true shield is not physical, but spiritual. He calls us to lift our eyes beyond the visible, to the powerful hand of God that works behind the scenes. When we feel too weak, faith restores our courage, not because our weapons are sufficient, but because He who fights for us is invincible. Every affliction, however great, becomes an opportunity to experience divine sovereignty in our lives. Remaining dependent on the Lord transforms the battle into surrender. Bottom of the form. Today, this verse reminds us not to rely solely on our own resources, talents, or planning. In conflicts, financial difficulties, or emotional challenges, trusting only in our abilities is insufficient. We must cry out to God and allow Him to guide our steps and decisions. Recognizing our dependence on God strengthens faith and lightens the burden of life. He is the one who guarantees protection, guidance, and victory in all situations. To reflect, have I relied more on my own strength than on God? Am I able to recognize my limitations and seek His true help? Am I willing to depend entirely on Him even when I have the means to act on my own?
Verse 7. But you saved us from our enemies and confused those who hated us.
David here acknowledges God's direct action in his life and in the history of Israel. He celebrates deliverance that does not come from human weapons, but from divine intervention. The victory over enemies demonstrates God's faithfulness, who protects those who seek Him with all their heart. It is a recognition of divine sovereignty over all situations and adversaries. The psalmist shows us that even in the midst of threat, God's presence brings security and justice. In light of this, we learn that many of the victories we experience bear the invisible mark of divine intervention. There are doors that open without explanation, threats that simply cease, and situations that change without us having the strength to alter the scenario. This silent movement of God shows that He works even when we don't perceive it. Just as He did with Israel, He continues to tip the scales in favor of those who trust in Him. Recognizing this action makes us more sensitive to the Lord's constant care. Today, this verse reminds us to be grateful for victories we cannot explain or control. In personal conflicts, persecutions, and injustices, remembering that God is our defender brings peace and confidence. We can rest assured that He confounds and drives away those who wish us harm. Celebrating these victories strengthens our faith and teaches us that He is always faithful. To reflect, have I acknowledged God as my protector? Do I trust that He will act against those who rise up against me? Have I celebrated His victories in my life?
Verse 8. In God we boast all day long, and we praise your name forever. Selah.
David teaches us here the importance of constant worship, independent of circumstances. To glorify God daily is to acknowledge that every victory, every rescue, and every blessing comes from Him. The repetition of trust and praise strengthens the heart and keeps hope alive. The psalmist shows us that even in times of difficulty, the soul finds reasons to celebrate the Lord. This is an expression of mature faith, which rejoices in God regardless of immediate results. There is a quiet beauty in learning to praise even when nothing around seems to invite praise. It's like lighting a small flame in the wind, protecting it with your hands until it grows. David reminds us that the heart that insists on worship becomes a dwelling place for a peace that doesn't depend on what happens outside. It is in this stubborn, almost whispered praise that the soul finds the thread that sustains it. And while we worship, we realize that God is not only the one who acts, but the one who accompanies. And that, in itself, is reason enough to praise. In practical life, we can apply this verse by cultivating daily moments of gratitude and praise. Even in the face of challenges or failures, remembering God's works gives us courage. Continuous worship renews hope and transforms our perspective on our problems. Praising God daily strengthens our faith and keeps us steadfast in His presence. To reflect, have I praised God every day? Does my worship depend on the circumstances? Can I see reasons to glory in God even in difficult times?
Verse 10. You make us retreat from the enemy, and those who hate us plunder us for themselves.
David expresses here a profound feeling of abandonment, an anguish we often feel when victory seems distant. He doesn't hide his frustration from God, showing that spiritual honesty includes revealing pain. Even in his leadership and trust in the Lord, he acknowledges the feeling of powerlessness in the face of adversity. The psalm teaches us that crying out to God sincerely is part of true faith. It invites us to bring our disappointment and insecurity before the Father, without fear of being judged. There are times when the heart tries to understand God's silence, and this silence seems to weigh more than the struggle itself. David shows us that even the strong stumble, and even the chosen wonder where their help is. This verse reminds us that faith is not a straight line. It passes through valleys where the soul feels forgotten. But it is precisely in these valleys that we learn to trust not in what we see, but in the God who sustains us when nothing makes sense. By confessing his pain, the psalmist teaches us that vulnerability is also worship, and that even the weakest groan reaches the Father's heart. In everyday life, we can apply this verse when we feel helpless or alone in our struggles. Expressing our pain to God, without feigning strength, allows us to renew our faith and seek divine guidance. It is an invitation to recognize that we don't always understand God's ways, but He remains present. Learning to cry out sincerely strengthens our intimacy with the Lord. In moments of defeat, we can seek His direction and comfort. To reflect, have I taken my frustrations to God? Do I feel safe expressing my discouragement to Him? How can I trust that God is still at work even when He seems distant?
Verse 9. But now you have rejected us and humbled us. You do not go out with our armies.
David describes the tension between victory and loss, between feeling protected and yet vulnerable. He shows how spiritual life often involves unexpected fluctuations, and even God's chosen ones can face setbacks. The psalmist does not pretend to understand everything, but remains faithful to cry out for justice. He teaches us that faith does not eliminate difficulties, but gives us courage to face challenges with God. Recognizing our dependence on God in times of conflict is an expression of humility and trust. There are times when the heart tries to understand why God allowed certain falls, certain scares, certain pains that seemed avoidable. But it is precisely there that faith grows most silently and truly, in the space between what we expected and what actually happened. When David admits this vulnerability, he reminds us that God is not offended by our questions. He welcomes them. It is in sincere dialogue, and not in perfection, that the Lord molds our trust. And as we walk between losses and promises, we learn that no stumble can erase God's care, nor prevent the purpose He has already written for us. Today, this verse reminds us that our efforts for justice do not always bring immediate results. It is an invitation to trust in God even when human plans fail or when we face betrayal and loss. We can apply this principle in situations of injustice, knowing that He observes and acts according to His wisdom. Even when we are wronged, our faith can become a silent testimony. Seeking refuge in God strengthens us against life's blows. To reflect, have I trusted in God in times of defeat? How do I react to the injustice I suffer? Am I seeking refuge in Him instead of relying solely on my own strength?
Verse 11. You gave us up like sheep to be eaten, and scattered us among the nations.
David expresses the vulnerability of a scattered and persecuted people, showing the feeling of abandonment and fragility in the face of adversity. He does not hide the despair that arises when we feel weak and exposed, but maintains a dialogue with God. The psalmist reminds us that even in humiliation, we can lift our eyes and hearts to the Lord. It is an invitation to sincerity, to place our fear and pain before God. He shows that faith is strengthened when we confess our powerlessness and dependence. There are times when the soul seems to wander aimlessly, as if carried by the winds of circumstance. In those moments, we feel the weight of not belonging, of being pushed away from what is safe. But even scattered, there is an invisible thread that binds us, sustains, the certainty that God never loses sight of any of His own. He gathers every fragment of our weariness, every part of our broken heart. And while the world tries to scatter us, He reunites us in His peace. Today, this verse challenges us to face moments of rejection or isolation without losing faith in God. When we feel displaced or misunderstood, we can apply David's lesson, remain steadfast in prayer, aware that God is attentive to every difficulty. Even when we are scattered by circumstances or people, He remains our safe refuge. Human vulnerability becomes an opportunity to experience divine care. To reflect, do I acknowledge my vulnerability in the face of difficulties? Do I trust that God is with me even when I feel isolated? How can I remain steadfast in my faith despite adversity?
Verse 12. You sell your people for nothing, and you do not increase your wealth with their price.
David and the people feel the pain of realizing that what was achieved through faith and devotion seems worthless in the face of oppression. He cries out to the Lord, remembering past faithfulness and the strength God has always shown in protecting His people. It is an expression of honesty and total surrender, an intimate and profound conversation with God about feelings of injustice, expressing pain, frustration, and complete surrender to the Lord's care. And in the silence of this seemingly unjust pain, we learn to place before God what no one else sees: the weariness of remaining faithful, the burden of continuing to do good without expecting anything in return, the feeling that our seeds of faith have been left out in the cold. It is in this place of surrender that the heart discovers that God never measures value as the world does. He gathers every hidden gesture, every renunciation silent, every tear that falls for love of His name. And while we wait, He works in depth, reminding us that nothing offered to Him is lost. It is in this secret comfort that the soul finds strength to continue. Today, we can apply this verse to recognizing when we feel undervalued in our faith or efforts. Even when the world doesn't value our godly choices, our trust should remain in God, who sees and knows every act of faithfulness. Still, we must stand firm, trusting that God sees every act of faith and loyalty. Even without human recognition, it is an exercise of trust and perseverance in the Lord. To reflect, have I trusted in the value God places on my actions? How do I react when I feel my spiritual efforts go unnoticed? Am I willing to remain faithful even without human recognition?
Verse 13. You make us a source of shame to our neighbors, a target of scorn and derision to those around us.
David speaks to the Lord with a heavy heart, expressing the humiliation the people feel before others. He does not hide the pain of being despised and ridiculed, but surrenders this feeling to God, recognizing that only He can transform shame into redemption. Each word is a sincere cry, an intimate dialogue of trust amidst shame and scorn. Even in humiliation, the heart remains open to divine intervention and the hope that comes from the Lord. Even when we feel the weight of condemning glances and words that try to diminish who we are, God calls us to remain steadfast in heart. He sees every hidden tear, every battle no one understands, every silence laden with pain. The humiliation we face before men is never wasted before the Lord. He transforms every wound into a testimony, every embarrassment into strength. When we surrender our shame to Him, we find refuge and restored dignity. And in the place where we were diminished, God promises to raise us up with honor and grace. Today, this verse reminds us how to deal with the judgment and scorn of others. We can choose not to be ashamed of our path of faith, but to present our difficulties before God, trusting that He restores and defends us. Maintaining dignity and trust in God is an act of spiritual courage. To reflect, how do I deal with people's judgment and scorn? Am I surrendering my shame to God or keeping it to myself? Do I trust that He can transform humiliation into restoration? Psalm 44, Part 1, verses 1 to 13, leads us through the heart of a soul that knows pain, humiliation, and abandonment, yet never ceases to cry out to God. It shows us that it is possible to be honest before the Lord, to express our frustration and sadness, and still keep our faith alive. Each verse reminds us that we are not alone in our struggles, and that the heart that turns to God even in the midst of adversity finds strength and courage. David inspires us to trust, even when victories seem distant, and to remain steadfast in the hope of divine intervention. It is an invitation to a faith that withstands the storms of life. As we finish this psalm, we are reminded that our cry, even marked by pain and helplessness, reaches the heart of God. It teaches us that, even in moments of despair, we can expect His action, trust in His mercies, and seek refuge in His faithfulness. May the daily practice of this psalm awaken in us the courage to cry out, the patience to wait, and the confidence to believe that He will lift us up, rescue us, and strengthen us at every step of our journey. Even when the soul seems broken to the dust, hope in God is renewed and sustains us. Now that we understand the meaning of each verse of Psalm 44, Part 1, verses 1 to 13, I invite you to continue meditating and praying over the next few days. Read each verse as a living declaration of trust. O God, even amidst pain, humiliation, and defeat, He remains faithful and strengthens His people. Let the truths of this psalm sustain your heart, renew your hope, and illuminate your path, even when injustice or suffering strikes. May the daily practice of this psalm awaken in you courage, resilient faith, and a constant cry, as was born in the heart of David. Remember, He sees, He acts, and His love never fails. And to seal this message in our hearts, we invite you to pray and keep with you this prayer inspired by Psalm 44, Part 1, verses 1 to 13. Return to it whenever you feel downcast, when enemies or difficulties seem greater than your strength, or when you need to remember that God is your help and deliverer. May these words strengthen your confidence, even when your heart is weary or the Lord's silence seems too long. He is faithful to lift you up, sustain you, renew you, and guide you every step of your journey. Remain steadfast, with faith, courage, and surrender, until He fulfills every promise over your life.
Prayer inspired by Psalm 44, Part 1, verses 1 to 13. Almighty God, our refuge and fortress, I come before you with an open heart, crying out for your mercy. In days of affliction, when enemies surround us and humiliation touches us, strengthen our faith so that we do not stray from your path. Teach us to trust even when everything around us seems to crumble, and to remember that, even in silence, you are attentive to the cry of your people. May our hope not falter, but be renewed in every prayer and in every remembrance of your faithfulness. Lord, raise us from the shadows of pain and guide us with your mighty hand. May courage flourish within us that does not fade in the face of oppression. O God of Israel, our Savior, teach us to persevere even when we are counted as sheep for the slaughter, when we feel the shame and scorn of those around us. May every tear shed be sown in your heart, and may we find strength to maintain integrity and trust in you. Renew our downcast souls, and may our words of supplication be transformed into sincere praise, even in the midst of pain. Lord, help us not to forget your faithfulness of the past, and to hold fast to the hope of your intervention in the present. May the remembrance of your mighty works inspire our daily faith. May our souls remain steadfast, even when enemies rise up. Beloved Father, raise up your people, rescue us out of love for your mercies, and do not abandon us to injustice or oppression. May we feel your presence strengthening us at every step, and may our trust in you be greater than any fear. Teach us to cry out with courage, to praise in the midst of struggle, and to remain faithful to your covenant, even when all seems lost. May our hope be a firm anchor, and may our hearts find secure rest in you. Lord, may your light guide us in the darkness, and your truth sustain us in the face of adversity. May each day be a testament to your eternal power, love, and faithfulness. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Now I want to reinforce the invitation I made at the beginning. If this message has edified your life, like the video and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that God sees, hears, and helps in times of distress. Psalm 44, Part 1, verses 1 to 13, shows us that even when we face oppression, confusion, or humiliation, the Lord remains faithful, strengthens our faith, and renews the hope of His people. He teaches us to cry out with courage, to wait with perseverance, and to trust that His help is eternal. And before we finish, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave your prayer request in the comments. It will be a joy to intercede for you. May God renew your strength, steady your steps, rekindle, keep hope in your heart, and follow every detail of your journey. Until the next video, may God bless your life, your family, and your business.